A very good morning and welcome to the Economic Summit Baden-Württemberg and the EU 2022. Ideas made in Baden-Württemberg for a sustainable and competitive Europe. That is our topic for today and I'm very happy to be part of the summit again. My name is Anja Lange. I'm a moderator here from Stuttgart where we are streaming right now from a studio. And on behalf of the Minister, Dr. Nicole Hoffmeister-Kraut, I would like to welcome you here to our Forum 1, our first session in this live stream. In the following hour, we will be discussing how we can shape a sustainable Europe in cooperation with partners from the industrial ecosystem in Baden-Württemberg. And we will do so in English and we have a simultaneous interpretation into German. Also wenn Sie gerne auf Deutsch das Ganze sehen möchten, einfach auf den anderen Stream hier auf der Webseite klicken. I would like to present to you our speakers here for the session and also I would like to welcome our host for today. Our host is Minister Dr. Nicole Hoffmeister-Kraut, the Minister for Economic Affairs, Labour and Tourism of Baden-Württemberg. Welcome. Thank you. And also on a remote connection, we are delighted to have EU Commissioner for Internal Market, Thierry Breton. Bienvenue. I don't think we can hear you right now yet, but oh no, we can actually. Perfect. It all works. Very good. And also on the remote connection, I'd like to welcome Dr. Franziska Brantner, State Secretary from the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action. Welcome.
Hello, everybody.
Actually, in the program, it was announced that Dr. Rainer Durga will be here. Unfortunately, due to illness, he can't be here, but he sent his Vice President of Unternehmer Baden-Württemberg, the Employees Association, Michael Stiel, also on a remote connection here with us. Welcome.
Okay, good morning to everybody.
And last but not least, here in the studio next to me is Roman Zitzelsberger, the Director of IG Metall Baden-Württemberg. Also welcome to you.
Good morning.
Yeah, welcome to you all. So we want to discuss today how we can work better together in Europe and what kind of framework is needed for a successful transformation. Obviously, the biggest challenge that we are facing right now. So, Mrs. Hoffmeister-Kraut, I am sure that you are very happy that we are coming together here for this summit today, aren't you?
Yes, of course. Thank you very much. A very warm welcome to all our guests here in the studio, but also online. And a special greeting to you, Mr. Breton, who is with us from Brussels. It's now the second time we are meeting via the stream online, and for us it's a great honor that we have the opportunity to talk directly with you. Thank you very much for joining us. As you know, Baden-Württemberg is a highly innovative industrial region, and as such our economy is especially affected by the transition towards sustainability. At the same time, we want to lead the way to the European Green Deal and make it work for our unique industrial ecosystem. The green transition brings our companies many challenges, but also a lot of opportunities. Let me first mention some challenges. Carbon pricing and stricter regulations raise the costs for our export-oriented enterprises. The price per ton CO2 rose to about €75. While many of our competitors from Asia don't have carbon pricing at all, there's definitely a risk of firm relocations that would not only lead to carbon leakage, but also weaken established industrial ecosystems. In addition, at the moment, interruptions in supply chains pose a serious challenge for firms across Europe. The shortage of microchips especially affects our car manufacturers, but also other branches. German car production fell by 11% in December last year. But more generally, this also affects the green transition as it interferes with the production of advanced goods and equipment needed for the transition, e.g. electric cars, environmental friendly machinery, wind turbines, to name just a few. Thus, increasing the EU's strategic autonomy is not only necessary for our common security interests, but also to set the green transition on a solid foundation. Despite these challenges, I also see big opportunities in these times of change. New markets and business models emerge. For example, electric cars already amount for a quarter of the European car market. So how can we best use those opportunities? In Baden-Württemberg, we focus on innovation. I see innovation as the key to the green transition. So we focus on innovation-friendly framework. We are among the most innovative regions in Europe, investing 5.8% of our GDP in research and development. We support innovation with different programs wherever we can. Let me just mention Invest BW, the biggest support program in our history, offering 300 million euro for innovative investment. Moreover, the green transition affects all sectors of the economy, especially in an industrial region like ours. It has really paid off to bring all stakeholders together, like we do in the strategic dialogue for the automotive sector. It's good to see that the Commission has also recognized this with institutions like industrial alliances and the recently founded Industrial Forum. Dear ladies and gentlemen, the transition can only succeed if everybody pulls together. This is why I'm glad that we are here today to exchange our perspectives.
Thank you. I think innovation is key, is a really central topic, but you've also mentioned some challenges that the industry in Baden-Württemberg is facing at the moment, like supply chain interruptions or high costs. So, Mr. Breton, I would like to get your European perspective on these challenges and on the transformation. And can you give us some insights there?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for having me with you today, dear Minister Hoffmeister-Kraut, dear Parliamentary State Secretary Brantner, dear Mr. Stiel, dear Mr. Zitzberger, and dear all. So yes, I'm very happy to be able to have this exchange with you. And I think the question you raised comes down to Europe's ability to take its economic and industrial destiny in hand. For 2 years now, Europe has been updating, if I may say so, its software, building a genuine continental industrial policy, a more assertive policy, open to the world, but of course on our terms. We are mobilizing all EU policies and financing tools to accelerate, of course, the green transition and digital transition. Because yes, the transition is, we all know that, very challenging. It is costly too, and it will require new skills. So it will require also access to abundant and affordable energy, mainly electricity, and of course, the list goes on. So yet, I am confident we have definitely very strong assets in hands. Of course, a skilled workforce, cutting-edge laboratories, first-rate infrastructures, and of course, our single market as the backbone of all of this. But we must go further. We must ensure that Europe is not in a position of great dependence in the years to come. And I believe in a Europe that leads the markets of the future, not one that is a mere subcontractor. To do this, we must develop our industrial capacity in Europe, let's say a factory Europe that gives itself the means to cater for its own needs, but also to conquer world markets and export. And this includes increasing our industrial capacity in the key technologies required for this transition, and to do so, the Commission will continue to champion European industrial alliances on batteries, raw materials, hydrogen, and more recently, as you know, semiconductors and data and soon to come on space launcher and zero-emission aircraft. But let me also take the opportunity to say that I am extremely pleased to see that the region of Baden-Württemberg is working so actively and effectively in the digital transformation. And in the framework of the initiative Economy 4.0, you bring together the relevant economic actors to shape the digital transformation in your extremely important region for Europe. On security of supply and the disruption, you too, I am deeply convinced that, as in so many other areas, there will be a before and an after the COVID-19 crisis. Until recently, there was a strong and long-held belief that in our globalized world, supply chains were uncheckable, that there was no such things as shortages. And of course, we all know now that this belief has been shattered, first of all, by the reality of China first for masks, then by the reality of America first for vaccines, and of course, for all of us here in Europe, this has been a wake-up call. Who would have thought that even our American partners will prevent our own European companies from accessing the essential elements which they actually produce themselves on American soil and which they needed for manufacturing vaccine in Europe? So we are experiencing this new reality well beyond the health crisis. Take the current shortages, you mentioned this of semiconductors, the energy crisis, our dependencies on raw materials, or the sharp price increase on timber. It is not a question of wanting to produce everything in Europe, of course, but on diversifying our sources of supply and securing the entire supply chain. Semiconductors are, of course, an excellent example of Europe taking its destiny in hands. Because without chips, we know that we will not be able to achieve our green transition, neither our digital transition. And with the EU Chip Act that we will present as early as exactly next week, we will accelerate the transition from research to the factory, investing in European megafabs, promoting international partnerships. All the ingredients will be here. The CHIP Act will also create the right investment conditions to ensure security of supply along the value chain and better withstand potential crisis in this absolutely key and crucial market for our future industries. Over and above measures specific to certain sectors, this requires, of course, a structural reflection on how to better equip for the next crisis, which, whatever its nature will be, may cause major shocks to demand or supply, affecting our industries and fragmenting our single market. So we are therefore working on an emergency instrument for the single market with two main components: better preparation and a reinforced capacity to reach in case of crisis. It is a time, I believe, to have a discussion without, of course, naivety and without taboos on the toolbox we need to guarantee our security of supply in our most critical value chain in case, of course, of crisis. And it is important for Europe to be on par with our partners who have already put in place measures to become more responsive and stronger in defending their interests. So in this, I will look forward with a lot of interest to our discussion, and thank you again very much to invite me to participate today. Thank you.
Of course, thank you very much. I'm sure we will go into discussion in a bit. Thank you very much for those interesting points you've made and raised there. But first, let me bring in State Secretary Brantner. So your ministry made some very ambitious plans, especially in terms of climate protection. What role or what kind of role can the industry play in this? Will the industry play?
Yes, thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be part of this panel. the industry is key, it's center. I mean, like, after all, it's not us sitting there in the ministry doing the transformation, but it's the companies, it's the industry, it's the science, it's all the actors together doing the transformation. So it is key to work with them together. And for Baden-Württemberg, of course, we have the automotive sector. And I'm quite proud that we will have a similar dialogue to what we have started in the Baden-Württemberg government with the automotive sector at the national level. And we know that it's not just about the big companies, also about them, but also about the smaller ones who are part of the production chain and who are really at the forefront of that transformation. And secondly, Monsieur Breton just also mentioned it, and it's key for Baden-Württemberg. It's the health industry, an important sector for Baden-Württemberg. There are also discussions about an important project of common European interest in the health sector. I think their companies are key as well. We're in dialogue with them. I will meet them next week this week in Stuttgart to see how we can really take their needs on board and design it well. So I think that they're really companies, our industry is key to understand the challenges better and to work together. And what is also important to me is, as Monsieur Breton said, to become more resilient as European industry. And in that sense, I think it's important that we give ourselves better tools to protect our companies from interference from outside, and that we have to make sure that the patents and the new production procedures and the new products will have the intellectual property in Europe and not, for example, in China. And this will be a key that we have to work on together. And I really hope that we take that challenge as a joint one, as a European one. And I can call on all companies to diversify and to make sure that we do not depend too much on one or another market, and that we keep our intellectual property in Europe. And we are there to support this, and whatever it takes, we are ready to do so. And I think, Monsieur Breton, as you said, it's important that we do this at a European level, not at the national one. But when we see that, for example, the small country of Lithuania is attacked by China, but German automotive companies are, also under attack because of that. It's in the end the entire internal market of the EU that is under attack. And I think that we have a big interest in defending it together, because if we lose the internal market, that's the biggest asset we have. And we have all interest to defend it together and not to allow it to be divided. So I think in this way, I'm really looking forward to work on the instruments that you, Mr. Breton, have provided together with our local companies, our scientists, because in Baden-Württemberg we also have very, very strong academia, science research, and bring that knowledge together.
Thank you, Mrs. Brantner. So whatever it takes, that kind of sounds good, doesn't it? Mr. Stier, you as a representative of the Employers Association, you have the perspective of what's needed in the industry. Is that enough to succeed in the transition, or what do you need?
Okay. First of all, I would like to remind all of us that the EU laid down 22 years ago, and that's really 22 years ago, the Lisbon strategy. The goal was to become the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy in the world, capable of sustainable economic growth with more and better jobs and greater social cohesion. I deeply hope, for the sake of all of us, that we still pursue this goal. Whatever is discussed in Brussels, Berlin, or Stuttgart should serve this aim. This goal is pursued in times of heavy challenges. A massive transformation of our whole industry-based business models, the common goal of reducing CO2 emissions, a severe energy crisis, and last but not least, the ongoing COVID crisis with its implication for global supply chains. This provided, I would like to tackle a few aspects what we do need for reaching the goal of Lisbon. We do need a reliable, competitive and coherent energy policy which continues to take into account the aspects of security of supply, economic efficiency, affordability and environmental compatibility with a sense of proportion. The turbulences on the energy markets, which do have indeed different reasons, are a matter of great concern. The industry backs the goal of Fit for 55. Nevertheless, we do need an approach which is open to all types of technology with numerous forms of instruments and political support. This has to be done without any harm to competition of best ideas and innovations. The further development of the Fit for 55 package must be accompanied by reliable framework conditions in order to drive forward the industrial transformation. This includes ensuring continued access to sufficient quantities of renewable energies and alternative fuels at competitive prices, as well as investing in modern energy, transport, and digital infrastructures. The course must also be set now for new international energy partnerships, for the import of green energy sources, and significant CO2 reductions. The European Commission has presented a plan for a carbon border adjustment mechanism. Its goal is to protect in this way as well European companies which fulfill higher standards than some competitors from other regions in the world. This is for sure very welcome and a very important approach, and we are open for any further discussions about this proposal. On the other hand, we do see that the same European Commission, which helps us to take part in a fair competition, does handicap us in other fields. One example is the planned EU regulation on global supply chains. European companies are very often the only ones in transition countries which introduce high labor and environmental standards and traceable supply chains. The Commission may cherish these efforts and not hinder this commitment and engagement of European companies abroad. The planned EU regulation will produce red tape and losers all over. This is not in line with the goal of Lisbon and does not help at all to improve the situation of workers and environment in emerging economies. Within the gold supply chain crisis, as a side effect of COVID crisis, some fundamental and structural weakness of our globalized supply chain have become obvious. Independency is the heart of globalization. We will not be able to reach a system of globalization and division of labor on the one hand, and an even more autarkic Europe on the other hand. This is a fact we have to face. If we opt in favor of globalization, we do accept dependencies. For us, the main two questions are: how much dependency can we afford? And in which field globalization led us to an absolute dependency of specified commodities and products. Having this in mind, we do welcome the European Chips Act. Its goal is to set up an own industrial production of the highly demanded semiconductors. The Commission has specific focus on semiconductors below 5 nanometers. We do recommend a much brighter scope of sizes, since we will face poor availability in other areas as well. Coming back to our Lisbon goal, I would like to add another regulation which might be at least partly counterproductive. With the Green Deal, we discuss the revision of REACH. Hereby we do, as in other areas, support support the intention of the Commission. In this case, however, the scope of regulation and planned prohibition of the use of several substances have reached a level that does not support this idea.
Mr. Stier,
Please allow me.
I just have to look a bit at the time. I'm very sorry, Mr. Stier. If you could just come to an end, please. Thank you.
Okay, then I'll skip this example. To sum it up, in the context of the necessary transformation process, we are open for discussions in order to reach the goal to strengthen our competitiveness and our position in the world.
Thank you so much for presenting these challenges and also your demands and some very clear words. So thank you. Mr. Zittelsberger, we heard now from the industry. Obviously, we have to take our employees on board as well when it comes to the green transition. So how are they affected?
Okay, I try it in a nutshell because I have to hurry because we have only time till 12 o'clock. How are the employees affected? In general, I deeply believe that we can solve it for the employees, the whole transition. But the truth is, it's very different. It depends on what are doing people at the moment. Because for one example, as closer as people are working at the powertrain, at the combustion engine powertrain, they more are fearing that the future is not a good future. Exhaust pipes or motors or whatever, and the staff working with all the things is fearing that they have no job in a few years. And that not only means the blue-collar workers, that means at the moment especially developers. Because if you don't have a future for a diesel engine in a personal car, you don't need to develop the next engine for this. And so we have a wide range of how affected the staff, and we see how rough it is to find possibilities for alternatives. And first of all, we need a positive picture of what can their future be. That means we need not only some good ideas of future products, we need to locate it, all these things in the factories where people now are employed, that they see, okay, there's not a loss, there's a change. And that thing is a most important we have to follow in the next month, in the next years. If we don't find a solution for this, we fear as a trade union that other people come and explain the story in the companies, in the plants, that climate change isn't true, that a change is not necessary, and that a lot of common discussions will find some people, for example, in employers' representation, which go not the way of change, which go the way we are all against this. And for that way, we not only need affected employees, we need involved employees. We need to make the staff in the companies as a part of the change, as a part of the how can we solve all this problem. With that, as a IG Metall, this transition have to be a transition in three ways. Of course, it has to be an ecological transition. We are deeply involved in this Paris goals, and with that we have to go the way Fit for 55. We are not against all this as a trade union. With that, we not only need goals, we also need measures, how we can do it. And the second thing, not only ecological, it have to be also a social transition. How can we find out what need people to have a good future? For example, for new tasks, the qualification and all these things. And third of all, how to involve people, to make part of them, to give them the change to debate with all us, and we have the co-determination in Germany with our works councils and us as a trade union. But we have to go one part deeper. We have to go to the employees by themselves and make them a part of them and show them how it works. And if we go this way, I'm absolutely sure we have a good answer against fears and against people who fearing that they are the losers of this transition.
Thank you for those really good examples and creating that positive pictures for employees that are really involved. But obviously it needs also some more from the EU. So, Ms. Hoffmeister-Kraut, what is needed from the EU to really get that transition done?
Yes, Commissioner Breton. For us in Baden-Württemberg, as we are such an innovative region, we, of course, need an innovation-friendly framework that these innovations can take place here in Baden-Württemberg and, of course, in Germany, in the European Union. We have seen that market-based instruments like emissions trading are very efficient tools to minimize the economic cost of climate protection. Let's use these tools now, instead of trying to fine-tune every detail. Let's leave the how to achieve the targets to those who know best, to the firms. Take the CO2 emissions norms for trucks planned for this year, for example. I can only call on the Commission to make a balanced proposal based on technological reality. Marketable alternatives for truck propulsion are still being developed. There's a real danger that ever stricter rules will overburden our manufacturers. Moreover, our firms need reliability. The CO2 emission standards for cars have already been reworked and tightened several times. This is the opposite of a reliable regulatory framework. The regulatory framework must be reliable and constant enough to allow long-term planning, as Mr. Steele mentioned, and investment decisions. Let me mention another example. The REACH regulation is about to be reworked and will be stricter regarding the use of some chemicals, especially so-called PFAS. There are many examples for products that would disappear from the market. This would be dramatic for our manufacturing firms and many SMEs in Baden-Württemberg. The medical technology industry would be hit very hard. Some specialized products would not be available anymore, and this ultimately hits doctors and their patients as it reduces their treatment choices. So it hits all of us. Many things are still unclear. A key issue is how to define essential uses, allowing certain chemicals. How can we be sure that no essential use will be forgotten? Dear ladies and gentlemen, we also have to think of our export industry. Baden-Württemberg is the home to many export-oriented companies. Exports amount in Baden-Württemberg for almost 40% of our GDP. When regulations become stricter, those firms have an incentive to relocate activities to less regulated parts of this world. To prevent carbon leakage, we urgently need a level playing field and strategic instruments on a European level, like the proposed carbon border adjustment mechanism. This is a step in the right direction, even though this mechanism tackles only import competition. It doesn't solve the rising cost of our products on export markets. Mr. Breton, what's your idea to face this challenge in specific? That would be very interesting for us. At the moment, a region like Baden-Württemberg has only limited possibilities to support firms in the transition process. We urgently need a regulatory framework that allows state aid in sectors especially affected by the transition. One possibility would be to use some of the state aid instruments that have been successfully applied to the COVID economy recovery, like extended liquidity support. We would really appreciate if this would be possible for also a state like Baden-Württemberg, of course focused on the companies who are deeply affected by these transition processes. So one last point, the Commission could also create an Ipci, a new project aimed to the transformation of the mobility industry, especially for the small and medium-sized automotive suppliers. They need, in this transition process, more support.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Mr. Breton, I can only underline the question that Mrs. Hoffmeister-Kraut just directed to you, and also if you could, see what are the right tools, what are the key measures that the EU are taking at the moment. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, thank you very much for this very interesting discussion. I would like to come maybe to make a few remarks, maybe coming on Mr. Litzelberger. I really think that it is extremely important indeed to have all our employees being fully involved in this transition, and this is why, as you probably know, we organize the internal market in industrial ecosystems. Now we have 14 ecosystems, and together with my colleague Nicola Schmidt, who is the commissioner in charge of social affairs, we reviewed every single industrial ecosystem together to make sure that we understand exactly what is needed in terms of skills. We call this transition pathway. And then the Commission is deeply involved together, of course, with the industry, with the unions, with employees, with also NGOs, academic, and everyone who is partnering in these ecosystems to make sure that we will be able to have everyone in this transition. And that's an extremely, extremely important work that we have done. I will be very happy to share this with you because, of course, it is really something that is extremely important at the level, of course, of our continent, but of course it will be very important for such an active state as Baden-Württemberg. So that's really something I wanted to say because it was a very important. Few words. I understand, Minister Hoffmeister-Kraut, for the car industry. I mean, this is a very important topic. Of course, we have our, let's say, Fit for 55 strategy. We know that now there is this target with the Fit for 55 and also the fact that by 2035, we will sell in Europe, in Europe, electric cars. I just wanted to say, because you mentioned that we need to continue to export, it doesn't mean that the rest of the world will not need thermal engine cars. I mean, it is not because we in Europe will be the first continent, of course, being fully, let's say, electrified, that for the others, they will adapt themselves to our strategy. And if I'm thinking to Africa, to South America, of course, the market of thermal engine will continue to be very important. And I really hope that our car industry will continue to export this, and that we will not let this only for Chinese companies. And that's why, of course, we are working, that's true, in terms of some norms, the Euro 7, because we believe that it's important to invest here also, of course, for us till 2035, but then, of course, for the rest of the world, because it will contribute not only to continue to develop this mobility, but also to do this on a much cleaner way. So I really think that it's extremely important to have also this discussion, including with the car industry. It doesn't mean, again, that because we will sell only electric car in Europe by 2035, that all the industry will have to stop, of course, including for hybrid cars and stuff like this, but that we will need outside of Europe, of course, for decades. So I think it's important to adapt here and to have a very pragmatical discussion. Of course, being totally coherent with our Green Deal strategy, Fit for 55, but also not being naive and making sure that everyone understands exactly what's happening in the planet and continue to make sure that we will continue to export our product everywhere in the world, even the one that we will not need anymore for us in Europe. But of course, in Europe, we are 445 million inhabitants on a planet of 9 billion inhabitants. So it means that we will continue to have a lot of things to do. REACH, that's very important. We are carefully analyzing not just REACH, but overall chemical industry. Chemical output of a second round of our review of strategic dependencies. So I agree that we need a holistic strategy, like you said, view of the chemical industry, and we are strongly working on this in the spirit you mentioned, and of course to help again here this transition. You mentioned very clearly the carbon mechanism adjustment tool, which is an important tool that we are working on. This is now a thing that we will discuss heavily in the Commission and to make proposal, because you're absolutely right. We need to make sure that we will be able to have a level playing field for our industries and to make sure that we will be able to not to penalize, of course, our industry in this strategy. But I would like also to say that in the transition pathway that I discussed earlier, we made sure that member states will have the ability to use some of this money to accompany, of course, this transition. And regarding the state aid that you mentioned, I just wanted to inform you that we are now in the process to revise our IPCI guidelines. I think this is something that you ask, and I think it's important. This is absolutely crucial in terms of, let's say, an element to ensure competitiveness as the criterion that innovation must go beyond the global state of the art technology, remaining fundamental. And for a region which such a high number of highly performant SMEs like Baden-Württemberg, it is absolutely important to highlight that the participation of SMEs and the collaboration between larger companies participating in an IPCI and SMEs will be facilitated and encouraged. So I really hope that it will fulfill your requirement for all the very important landscapes that we have in Baden-Württemberg for all the SMEs which are Mittelstand, which are so important, of course, for the region. That's what I could say at this stage. I don't want to be too long.
Thank you. Very important. Thank you so much for your strong opinion as well. Let me just quickly ask if Mrs. Brantner is still there in our stream, because I know she has to leave. I don't think so. No, she isn't. Mrs. Brantner had to leave because she's going to the official funeral in Heidelberg, so she will be excused.
No, I'm still here.
Oh, she is still here. We can't see you anymore. That's why.
Yes,
perfect. Okay, all good.
If you allow, I'm still here. I'm just not with my picture any longer.
All good.
I have to go in Heidelberg. You know, last week we had very terrible events,
yes.
and we have the ceremony for it. So, but I wanted to respond very briefly because I think that there were really important points that were made also by our minister, because I think that she is right in saying that we need additional financial support for our car industry and for the automotive sector, etc. And that's why we are working on carbon contracts for differences, because we really believe that we need additional support This is what we are working on right now, and we hope that we will get positive lights from the Commission for doing this in order to have this process really financed sufficiently and well enough. And I agree with Mr. Zitzelsberger that we really need to use the power, innovation and determination of the employees in this process. It can't be done against them, but with them. And Mr. Breton, you just mentioned the chemical sector. I agree. You will also come up with a positive list, as far as I know, with products and product procedures, which will be new and innovative, that should be supported. So I think this is important to do. And then we also have the debate about the free quotas for the exports when it comes to the CBAM. And I think that debate is ongoing. It is already in the proposal, and we have to see how we have to adjust this or not. But I just want to say that this is a joint interest to make it a level playing field, but at the same time to use the advantages that it brings. Because if we don't do anything, we will also lose jobs at home if we don't have anything to protect our companies from cheaper and less sustainable imports. So that is sort of the difficulty to bring it together, but I think we're on a good way. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, State Secretary, and thank you for now. Mr. Zitzelsberger, I'm sure that you are very happy that Mr. Breton as well as State Secretary Brantner are aware of the topic, are mentioning and highlighting it. However, I assume that you also have some more that is needed to really take the employees with us on this journey, right?
Yeah, I heard a lot of things from Mr. Breton, from Ms. Brantner, and also from Minister Hoffmeister-Kraut, which are very important that this transition story can be a successful story. For example, Ms. Brantner said industry is a key, and this is a most important thing in front of all, because if we are thinking we can go another way outside industrial powerness and strange, especially Baden-Württemberg will be another area as it is today. Our situation is a comfortable situation because we have the knowledge, we have the companies, we have employee representatives like me and employer association who can work together, social partnership and all these things. What is very important, and Mr. Breton give some points for this, is how can we locate all these innovative products there where they are, where we have the production and the development today. And what Minister Hoffmeister-Kraut said is so important that we can that we get the allowance to give companies some monies, because we have to support companies, especially Tier 2 suppliers and Tier X suppliers, because there will be the most problems, especially in Baden-Württemberg. And we have the allowance to support regions, because we have very strong regions which a really good industry cluster, but it's a cluster all made still more or less the same. For example, parts of the combustion engine powertrain. And in this region, we have to look in Baden-Württemberg where we need maybe different products or different parts or different developments for them, but we have to get the allowance to help all these regions too. And there is one point, Mr. Breton, which is very important in my opinion. We can help we can help some regions to become better strengths and less weaknesses. But all the weaknesses we follow for years to help them, for decades, and they don't come in a better situation. But we have a lot of strong regions, especially here in Baden-Württemberg. And what we have to do is to give all these strong regions the power, and also all these strong companies the power to stay as a strong companies and regions in the next decades, in the next years. And this is very important for us as a trade union, also as for the companies and the regions themselves.
Thank you so much. Mr. Breton, before we would like to give you the opportunity to react, just quickly, maybe due to the time before that, I would like to ask Mr. Stiel as well for his statements and his opinions, and also if he has some key messages he would like to give to you and to Brussels. So Mr. Stiel, maybe first you, and then Mr. Breton with his reaction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. With the very ambitious goals of developing a climate-neutral society, we face, and that's real, huge challenges. The conversion to a climate-neutral industrial country requires a transformation in all areas, the economy, the society, and I think we have to take with us on this journey the whole society and the whole population in our countries. For instance, Germany must almost halve its emissions by 2030. That is within only 9 years. This requires a broad mix of instruments in order to advance the energy, transportation, and heating transition. The climate-friendly technologies required for the 2030, which is an intermediate climate goal, are largely known, but are not yet commercially available for companies and consumers, and are not yet available on an industrial scale. Until 2045, however, there's still a considerable need for research and innovation. And for industry, it's not just the capital costs that pose the greatest challenge when making investment decisions, but above all the significantly higher operation costs of climate-friendly technologies. Therefore, the usage costs of low CO2 production processes and energy sources must be made competitive with fossil energy sources and existing processes. The proposal by Federal Minister of Economics Habeck for climate protection contracts to support the transformation, the acceleration of planning, which is very important, and approval procedures, and the planned abolition of the EEG surcharge are be welcomed as important, if not necessary, sufficient steps. The announced reform of levies, surcharges, taxes and fees in the energy system requires clear relief for industry. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mr. Stier. And now, Mr. Breton, if you could give your reactions to Mr. Zitzelsberger and Mr. Stier, and also if you could provide us with an outlook. What are the next big steps? What is in plan in the EU? Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of things, of course. For the let's say the next step that we have ahead of us. So first, of course, in order to achieve this very important transition, we will need probably to double the capacity to produce electricity on our continent within the next 30 years, and that's of course a huge goal. And it means that in order to do this, we need to invest a lot, of course, renewable energy, decarbonized energy, also transportation of ports. Just to give you an example, for transport electricity, it's between something like 45 billion per year. For renewable, it's 65 billion per year. So that's a huge amount ahead of us. And of course, we know that it will not be sufficient, but that's absolutely mandatory, because at the end of the day, both in terms of, let's say, green steel, green, let's say, manufacturing, green transportation, we will need this electricity, and that's of course a lot of things, that a huge amount of money that we will need to invest. But I wanted to say again that it's not again that because we are doing this in Europe, that we will not be able to continue to produce what other parts of the world need. That's something very important. And I will not welcome Mr. Steel industry coming to say me, hey, help me to close what I'm doing just to do now, let's say, electricity car, because we will need also the rest of the world. So that's something important to be fair together and to have this path for us, but also for the rest of the world, because behind that we have knowledge and we have jobs. So we have to be very serious on this. And of course, we will not be able to pay for everything. At the end of the day, we know that the money is coming from debt. The debt will have to be reimbursed by our children. So that's really something that I'm calling for responsibility for all of us. But of course, we will do a lot of work. We will do everything we can to support, including by helping what will be needed for this transition. And we spoke a little bit about semiconductors. So you asked me, what could we expect? So you could expect that next week, we will issue a European Chip Act. It has been announced by Ursula von der Leyen, our president, because of course we know that we will need semiconductors everywhere in this transformation, everywhere, both, by the way, for the green transition, but also for the digital transition. But of course, it's not the job of the public money and the taxpayer money to do what companies have to do. The demand is huge. So today, Mr. Schill, it is definitely the job of the actual semiconductors company to invest in the actual components, because the demand is here. And we don't need to have a tax money payer to do this. On the other hand, we will support definitely any new investment for the next generation, where we have a new market to invent, to discover cutting-edge technologies. And here we are ready to put a lot of money on the table for research, development, and new mega fab in this new market, because here we have still some uncertainty, and this is where we can use again public money or taxpayer money to do this. And we are ready to do this extremely seriously, because at the end of the day, we know that these components will be needed again for all our green transition and also a digital transition. Let's take a car. Just for a car, if it is an electric car, we know that in 5 to 10 years, the price of when you look at the price of the car, 35 to 40% of the price will come from the battery. That's why we have now a whole strategy, and 35% only for semiconductors. So it means that it will, for the actual car, you will have only 25% of the total value. So we see the huge transformation for electric cars. And of course, this is why we need to make sure that we can control the semiconductor industry here in Europe. You will see also that we have a taxonomy, of course, also for this transitional energy, like gas. We will need gas, like nuclear. Some countries will need also nuclear. So we have to be serious here also to make sure that we can have this transition pathway, even if, of course, we all want that as soon as we can to be able to produce 100% green energy or decarbonized energy. But we know that we will need also to build this pathway, and you could expect, of course, this to be announced soon too. So that's basically what I wanted to say in a nutshell. We are also extremely careful, and I'm extremely careful and responsible for the internal markets to make sure that we'll be able to protect, of course, our market, and to have always a level playing field while, of course, taking into account this youth transition, but making sure that this will not impact the competitiveness of our industry. That's a very important work that I'm working on day and night. Thank you.
Oh, Mr. Breton, day and night. That sounds good. And of course, you, as we learned in our last discussion last year already, you know all the complexity of this discussion. And of course, as Mr. Zitzelsberger said, and I agree 100%, we need the people who have to create this change in the companies and also, of course, in the society. There has to be a balance, and we can only be successful if we work together on our common goals, which I think everybody agrees. We have to do something against the climate change. The goals are set, and now we have to find the right way. And the transition towards a sustainable and climate neutral economy is the major challenge of our times. And Baden-Württemberg accepts this challenge. Of course, we are doing our best to support our firms in this transition. We have our own projects and initiatives like InvestBW, or we are funding an innovation park for artificial intelligence. That's also one of a cutting edge in innovations we have to support in Baden-Württemberg. And Mr. Breton, I think it's very important. No one of us can solve the green transition alone. And it must be our main goal that we have a strong internal market in the European Union, so that we can also go our own way in this transition, that we are not driven by other markets in China or the US, for example. And I think the potential is great in Europe, and we need more industrial alliances to bring these important topics also to get the awareness, so that we find the right way, and that we take all the arguments into condition. So I thank you very much, Mr. Breton, that you spent so much time with us. Our Digital Economic Summit continues now at 1 o'clock when we talk about the SMEs. Mr. Breton, we are a strong country for small and medium-sized companies. They are also a driver of the transition here in Baden-Württemberg, and I think they are also important for the European Union. So thank you very much. All the best, and take care.
Thank you very much. Thank you, and then you can count on me also for SMEs. That's extremely, extremely important for the internal market. Thank you very much.
Merci. And thank you so much from my side as well to Mr. Zittelsberger, Mr. Stiel, thank you. And of course, Mrs. Hoffmeister-Kraut, as she said, at 1 o'clock, we see you here again in the live stream if you like. And also, obviously, this is a economic summit where a lot happens. So we now have, for example, press conference, and there are also some background talks that are taking place. So yes, see you at 1 o'clock. Thank you.